to do that. Okay, let's take a minute and just check in, take a deep breath and try to get ourselves fully present together for our time together. And if you would, just take a moment, and if each of you would please maybe, I know some of you know I like to do this, give us a number from 1 to 5, how you are today, with 1 being you're lucky that I'm here, that's all I can manage, you're welcome, and a 5 being, yes, I'm on top of the world, I am doing so well, I have so much energy and I'm accomplishing so much. So that's our scale, from 1 being the lowest number and 5 being the highest number. So just check in with us, tell us, take a moment, tell us how you are, what your number is. And just basically, we want to remember that each of us are human beings before we're teachers, community members, graduate students, and all these things. We're human beings first and foremost. So whoever wants to start, go ahead and share with us what your number is and how you're doing.
I just put mine in the chat, but I said I'm a 4.
Okay.
So pretty good.
Okay. And anything that's particularly, that's a great number of 4. Yeah. Anything that's kind of behind that?
I think our district had spring break last week, so I think it's just nice to, have a little bit of a refreshing break and then jump back into it.
Yeah, that is nice. Okay, good. Miss Emily's a 4.
I'll go. I put a 3 in the chat.
Okay.
We're on spring break this week, so it's been kind of nice because I've been trying to finish my thesis before graduation. So I'm a 3. I'm kind of a little bit in the middle, trying to get it done. So
that makes sense. Thank you, Ms. Jessica.
I would also say that.
Okay.
About a 3. We are also on spring break, so it's really nice to have that break, but working on a thesis, working on this class, working on some stuff at school that I haven't got done yet, that needs to get done. So it's kind of a time to get things done, but not really a break. So 3 to 4.
Okay, that's pretty good though, relatively speaking.
It is.
Go ahead.
I'm also 3, and then I'm also during the spring break too. I have the same feeling like this is a really good time to do the courses and works and thesis, and also this April is coming, so the graduation is coming. This is my last courses here, so I'm a little bit excited, but still a lot of things need to working on.
Yeah, that the end is truly in sight, huh? Okay, sounds good. All right.
I would say I'm a 3.5. It's also my spring break, so I'm using it to finish my thesis and work on this class. So that's kind of like, but I mean, we're getting there. We're like 3 weeks away from graduating, so I'm just holding on tight and I'm doing it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, who's next?
I'll go. This is Francine. I think I'm a 3 too.
A 3.
Unfortunately, I'm not on spring break. We had spring break earlier. I wish I was on spring break again, but
yeah.
But definitely there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I can see it. We're almost there, and I just, with crunch time at school and testing and everything for our students, and then getting everything else done we need for classes. So 3, teetering on 3, maybe a 2 a little bit, but I'm good.
Yeah. Well, we're trending pretty well for how busy everybody is. Okay.
I was going to say maybe a 2.5, or I put 3 in the chat. So I'm quite similar. I had spring break last week, so I relaxed a little too much, and now I'm feeling it. I have a lot to do.
Okay, that sounds good, Miss Carly. Who's next?
I'll go next because I'm about to go. I just got home from work and I'm afraid that the song's going to disconnect and I have to rejoin. But I'm probably at a 3. My admin recognized me for faculty member of the month on the same day that I was 30 minutes late to first period because I forgot to set an alarm. So,
Oh, it happens. It happens.
that's
Wow. Well, congratulations on being recognized like that. Wow. Yeah. Okay. All right. Who's next?
exciting little cherry on today's news. So
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Who haven't we heard from?
I haven't. Can you hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'll go. I said I was a 4 because we're just getting back. We're on the drive back from California
Wow.
for spring break. So.
Okay. Oh, that's exciting. Hopefully the weather's nicer there than it has been here in Cedar City.
Yeah, the weather, well, it's cold, but nice. So that's good.
Okay.
All right, I'll go. I missed the beginning. I think you said that we all are answering, right? I missed the very.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Mhm.
this is Kristen Johnson, not Matt. My husband set up his iPad. We're actually in Georgia right now. We're in Savannah, so that's like your side of the. Right?
Makes me homesick. Yeah.
So we it's kind of a map dot spring break thing. We went to Atlanta and now to Savannah, and it's beautiful and like 85 outside, and my mom's with the kids and it's, you know, very cold. It's snowing, feet of snow where I'm from Lehigh. So school wise, I feel like 3 because I feel overwhelmed with everything. Same thing, thesis, but other than that, I guess I'm a 5 on vacation wise, but 3 for school first.
Okay. It just shows our multiple identities, right? Yeah. So true. Okay. Thank you, Miss Kristen. All right. Who haven't we heard from?
So I'll go.
Okay. Thank you.
I put 4 in the chat box. It's my spring break too. I'm just a happy person. I got extra time to get my things done, clean my apartment, and did my laundry. I also FaceTime my mom before the Zoom meeting. She's doing great. So that made my day.
Oh, that's so wonderful. And as a mom myself, I love it when my kids do that. So thank you. Okay. Have we heard from everybody? I don't think so.
I can go. I am at like a 4. We had spring break last week and then we had a snow day yesterday.
Yeah, we had a late start here in Cedar City. Mhm.
Yeah, and it was I'm from the East Coast where we got a lot of snow days. Like growing up in my first couple years as a teacher, and then I moved to Utah, and it turns out you don't really get snow days here because it snows all the time.
Yeah, you just have to keep going. Mhm. True.
But yeah, so when you do get them, it's like a nice little treat.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, thank you, Miss Ashley. All right.
I can talk for a second.
Thank you.
I am a 2, I would say. Life's a little hectic right now. Maybe a 1. I just got off a spring break, but there's a lot going on. So
Okay. All right. Well, we're sending positive energies to you. Okay. Have we heard from you, Miss Lindsay? I don't know. Have we heard from everybody? Sounds like it, maybe. Okay. All righty. Well, given that time is short, I really want this to be for each of you. This is your time. You have your personal PhD right here. And I'm so excited for each of you. I know everybody's working on, even if they're not maybe graduating this spring, that's probably coming up soon. How many of you are, can you give me a thumbs up? Are you graduating this April and your thesis has to be done this April? Oh, quite a few. This is wonderful. Congratulations. Congratulations. Well, even if you're not this semester, it's around the corner and it's a big accomplishment. So that's good. And you know, my first master's degree, my thesis project turned into being a pilot for my doctoral work. So some of you are really doing very interesting work, and your writing is very strong. I could see a, you know, whoever, you know, it's not necessarily that people have to go on to a doctorate. We have wonderful teachers who never do. So that's not necessary. But if you do choose to, that's always another exciting step to go through. So I'm just so encouraged and hopeful that the project that we're doing for this class will inform what you're doing for your thesis in some regard, because action research, teacher research is generally about looking at problems that teachers are, or conundrums that they're working on in their practice, and people are always looking toward how can I be exemplary? And we have a pretty good idea by now what that means, and we're a good way into finishing our projects and onto that final step as we get closer to closing out our semester. So let me just open it up for each of you, and let me know, you know, are there questions that you're having? It can be about your writing. It can be about the content that we've been reading. It can be connections between your thesis and this course. So let me be your resource. I'm not super good at looking at the chat while we're Zooming, but I definitely will see the chat after we're done. So I know it's always kind of a tight space, but if each of you, I would like you to feel free to have the opportunity to ask a question, make a comment, what have been highlights, lowlights, questions. Where are you as we're heading into the downhill side of our course?
This is more on the paper. Is that okay?
Perfect.
I asked you when I sent in my paper yesterday, but I didn't know if anyone else knew. I wasn't really sure how to put in the core curriculum, like how that, you know, like specific this on history when you're elementary, you know, it's like the whole thing. I wasn't sure how to put that into the three things, like the high expectations. That I didn't know how we were supposed to do that. So mine's very general, but I wondered if you had a more specific way you wanted that done.
Okay, and I did see yours came in, Miss Kristen. I just hadn't had a chance to read through it yet.
Oh,
So
no problem. Yeah.
I saw that. I try to get the feedback turned around really quickly so that you all have maximum time.
You're very fast.
You know, work on it. I don't want to be the one who slows you down. So let me see if I'm getting it right, and other people feel free to chime in. So Ms. Kristen, you're asking about the three main principles of exemplary teaching that Latson Billings shares are high levels of academic achievement, high levels of cultural competence, and high levels of criticality, that so what sociopolitical consciousness, right? That's what you're referring to?
Oh, yeah, but I'm just wondering, so we go into the core curriculum and we're supposed to say the water cycle fits into this. Like, what do we mean by the core curriculum fitting into those three things? Like that specific, or is it just generally like language arts and everything is over? This is all on high expectations. I don't know if I'm even looking at it right. I'm not sure what that you want from that in section that you added in the video.
Oh, the end section. Okay.
Yes. how
Okay.
do I fit that in to go with those three things?
Okay, that makes sense to me. So that's really where you're applying everything that you have developed out in the first two sections. So one of the things that I notice, and we arbitrarily kind of divided it into three sections just to chunk it a little bit, to make it a little more doable to work on. But the big thing is that the sections should fit together. And I'm sure that that makes sense to you because your thesis has to be that way too. Your data chapter has to, inform your conclusions and discussion, and your theoretical framework should drive how you're looking at your data and so on. So the same thing here is you're looking at, you laid out in part one, the context of US public schooling. And that's a system that has not ever been equitable, even though it was intended to be so. So we're still kind of working toward the ideals of our public schooling, its potential, and then its reality still aren't meshing. So what the bottom line of what makes teachers exemplary is the exemplary ones address that. And
so I understand all of those parts. I just don't understand how specific parts of the curriculum we're supposed to weave that in. How specific do you want it to be?
So that's kind of the macro level. You have that background. Then part two, we zoom the lens in a little bit more, and we're more at the meso, the middle level. And you've developed out your framework. You talked about, how does your framework match up with the standards of effective teaching for Utah. So that then now you have this lens that you developed in part two, where you're drawing on Dr. Herrera, you're drawing on T-Mont Hammond, and so on. So then you're going to apply it in part three. That's where you're looking at it, and you developed in part two a lens, which is like a pair of glasses. This tells you what to look for in your classroom. So you're not doing it as as a what's the right word? You don't want to get it like too technocratic in like these bite-sized pieces. It's more of a stance, more of a way of doing it in part three. So so everything that I do as a teacher, I'm looking at everything that I do, every lesson, every interaction, everything I hang up on the walls, every book I select. I filter them through the lens that I have developed in part two. So I'm going to approach my curriculum that way. So if I'm an elementary teacher and I'm looking at science, and I'm talking about plants and so on, I'm gonna contextualize that as far as start with the learners, not the lesson plan. So all of my books that I choose, my lessons that I design are going to be filtered through that theoretical framework that I have, where I'm affirming students' identities. So like if my students are Latinx, I'm drawing out that science and math is in their historical culture. If my students are Indigenous, lots and lots of math and history, art, social studies, all these sort of things I'm going to couch my curriculum in their background. So I have to be fully aware of that, knowing that I'm always fostering high levels of cultural competence, high levels of academic achievement, and I'm aware of that criticality. So I know, for example, that girls are often not called on or expected to be leaders as much as men. So I'm as male students, so I'm attending to that in every lesson, every book, every interaction, what I have on my classroom walls. And so the way that everything I do in my classroom is filtered through that lens. So does that help at all?
So that's really more for the third section. I guess I was just wondering what you put in that. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? That last row in the chart we were supposed to make, and it said core curriculum, and everything that you're referring to sounds more like what we would draw out in that third section. And I just wasn't sure what I was supposed to put specifically after, you know, school or Utah standards, and then it was like core curriculum. I didn't know if I was specifically thinking of things right now. I'm just going to leave that. You can look at it and see.
Okay.
I didn't really do much in that section, but I get what you're saying, but that seems more like the third section, and I just wasn't sure how to refer to it in the second one. So
okay, that's
okay, thank you.
I'll look at yours and see if I understand the question better.
Okay.
Does anybody else like have some input that maybe I'm missing or I'm not hearing right? Maybe because, you know, students often they learn more from each other than they do from their professors. So there might be some nuggets that some of you have that maybe I'm not saying in a helpful way or not catching.
I think what she's referring to is like the graphic organizer that you're having us use. There's the last section on that, like the last column is our core standards. So like our Utah State standards. So I'm thinking what she's asking is like, do we put some notes on that graphic organizer on things we already do in our classroom that fall into those three principles of Dr. Gloria Billings? Yeah.
That would definitely be one way to handle it. I guess the way I look at curriculum is that all of my content area is going to be filtered through those things. So if I'm doing science, you know, I'm going to be looking at what objectives the state expects me to, what are the performances, the skills, knowledge, and outcomes that the state expects me to do. What does that look like? And then I'm going to put it in as far as like cultural competence as well. For example, I watched a student teacher the other day, and he did this great lesson on natural resources, and he was talking about Iron County here in Utah. And so, you know, obviously for high levels of academic achievement, students need to be able to identify what natural resources are. But as he was talking about it, he talked about Iron County in a way that he definitely talked about kind of like the pioneering history of Iron County and how from 1847 through like 1868, there was mining and people were coming down here for that reason. What he didn't talk about at all, which I was kind of surprised about, was that there were people here in Iron County before 1847. So what he was missing in that curriculum was that the mining is only one narrative of and one population that was addressing the natural resources that are in Iron County. He was telling one particular narrative that was true, but also like only that narrative. Does that make sense? So the cultural competence there would be that you're looking at not just the mainstream narrative, but this is actually the homeland of Southern Paiutes. So there was no acknowledgement of that at all. Does that make sense? So particular topics are going to fit, you're going to teach all of your curriculum through those lenses and hit on all of those. So your graphic that graphic is meant for you to just kind of understand how the Utah effective standards are not the same as the principles of exemplary teaching. They are connected, but they are not the same thing. So I wanted to line those up to kind of show you how they translate to each other. And then they guide your curriculum.
Yeah, that makes sense. It was just that last, I just don't understand what to put in that last bit, like what specifically, because you're saying big overarching things and I'm not sure how to put that in there. So I'm not going to put anything more. And then I will, maybe that's fine. It kind of sounds like it's more for our own understanding of where, if we're thinking of a topic, how would we do that? And then we'll write about that in chapter 3 or section 3.
Yeah.
So I think I'll get there. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah. That was a good one, Miss Kristen. And I think, the reason I used that graphic was because I was running into issues last term where people were collapsing. They weren't seeing how the principles were aligning with the Utah state standards of effective teaching. So they do correlate, but they're not the same. And then your curriculum feeds into that. Other things. I think one of the big things that I see is be sure that as you go through your writing and rough drafts are rough, so you don't have to apologize when they come in and everything's not sparkly. I mean, that's the whole nature of drafts. So as you're reworking them, make sure that your paragraphs are divided out. I see a lot of like these mega paragraphs, and I know I had to really work on that myself. I tend to my background is in critical theory, and if you've ever read any of Peter McLaren or Henry Giroux, some of these critical theorists, they have sentences that are like that long. And so I had to unlearn how to doing that. And I had to learn to write in very much more concise, brief sentences for clarity. So I see a lot of paragraphs that could really be divided up into more than one paragraph. So if you have a topic sentence, and then support that with the tell me, show me, so what, that I'm really looking for that. And that will help you a lot in writing your thesis projects as well, because you have to be thinking about, is my reader understanding what I mean? Am I taking my reader where I want them to go, so that my reader can make their own conclusions and see if they agree with me or not? So that would be one thing that I would say. Be sure that you go through, make sure that these mega paragraphs do not contain so many different topics. Break them up and have each section transition to the other as you get ready to write your final draft. Obviously, that's not going to be in the rough drafts, but head that way. Other things that it can be about content that you were like, "Whoa, I was so triggered by that," or "I really didn't understand that."
Hi, Dr. Harris.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm interested in Dr. Hammond's framework. So because he made it very clear, like four parts or area we need to do, like awareness, learning, partnerships, and something like that.
Yeah.
So he also lists different kind of like guidelines for us how to do that right.
Right.
So in our writing, do you think we can do this way? Like we read all these guidelines, and then we think about our real experience in teaching, and then see, yeah, how well I do this part. Oh, then this part I still have room to do better. Can we do this way?
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Because a lot of times, you know, teaching is it's such a mix of art and science. You know, a lot of people think that because they've been on the other side of teacher's desk for 12 years or something, that everybody thinks that they're a teacher. And in some ways they are, you know, like everybody teaches somehow, even if it's informally. Yet there are some specifics that you come to our side of the desk, teacher's desk, and it's not as visible to people on the other side, even though they've been watching us for all of their schooling careers. And so how do we know what exemplary teaching is? And I often hear people talk about teaching, and they'll just randomly use the word exemplary. But in the research, there's a specific definition of exemplary. And so a lot of times people will just look at it and they're like, well, I like that teaching, that looks good to me, or I like those posters, I like that bulletin board, that's exemplary. No, 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 no. There's a research base of that. Maybe you do like it, maybe it is nice, you know, but that doesn't necessarily mean it is exemplary. If it's exemplary, it must address those three principles. And the one that really differentiates teachers is, do they address the third one, the historical inequities, that they are the teachers who are successful even where other teachers continue to fail. So by applying the frameworks, whether it's Hammond's, whether it is Muhammad's, there's multiple frameworks, and even you can create your own. Like a lot of people like the 21st century one, but what is it missing? What is it missing? It is missing that criticality. So there's a lot of really interesting frameworks, but do they address that criticality? If they don't, then it doesn't fit into the research-based definition of exemplary. So it's, you know, sometimes we need a special language, but then people say, well, you're so exclusionary because you're using this academic language that only people who have had graduate degrees can understand. And that's been a legitimate critique of critical theory, where I don't know how many of you have read any of like Peter McLaren, Henry Giroux. If you have read some of these kind of founding people, their rhetoric is very dense. And people will say, well, you have to have a graduate degree to understand what they're saying. But the downside of using this more kind of everyday common language is that when people are talking about something like exemplary, it might mean one thing to one person and another thing to another person. But we're talking about it in this class as a research base, that there's empirical evidence for it. And so by using the frameworks, then you can actually say, this is art and it's science. Art as in, every teacher creates their own, none of us can be a cookie cutter of each other. That's the art of it. But it's also not anything goes. there's a science to it. And so it's research based. We know what these successful teachers do. And so we're using that definition that is empirically based. And that's how we're determining what exemplary is. And we look at our own classrooms and kind of evaluate that. Is my classroom exemplary? It's not just because I have a warm, fuzzy feeling about it, but because I'm actually using research to document, and I'm using these criteria to measure. So it's more data-based. So that's how you can, you know, you can be confident. A lot of you are leaders in your schools. You can be confident as you're sharing and interacting with colleagues, and you can draw on the research, even as you look at your own classroom first. I found that in my own teaching, the best way that I had to interact with my colleagues was by having my own classroom exemplary. Then it wasn't necessarily totally defined by our dialogue, but you could look at my classroom. I had the same students that my colleagues had. They came from the same neighborhood, the same families. They faced many of the same challenges. And yet, why were mine outperforming other teachers? And I could empirically point to the reasons why, not just because it was warm and fuzzy. So, excellent question, Miss Cece.
Thank you. That helps.
Other things while you have your own personal PhD at your service. My undivided full attention is here for you. Are you having any trouble working the literature into the 3 sections using Herrera, Alex Vinay's book? Are you having any trouble with that, or is that pretty going pretty smooth? I'm guessing it's going pretty smooth if I'm not hearing anything else. Other questions? Those were some good points. I know everybody's thinking about.
Everyone's must be tired today. We're all kind of.
I think so.
I did. I don't know. I guess this is a question. So I realized in my paper, since we had read so much from Herrera on the culturally and linguistically diverse students, I started including that, and then I realized, oh, but I mean more than that. Like, I mean, there's all the the underrepresented and or marginalized. Like, what is the best term that you want us to use for all these different? It feels like there's different terms that reference all different groups of people. Is there a right or a wrong way that you want us to reference, or should we reference more specific? Or I guess that's my question.
Kind of the overall catch-all is students that have historically been underserved.
Underserved. Okay.
Yeah. And I know that term sometimes triggers teachers because teachers work really hard. But it's not necessarily because of teachers. It's just that the system has been put up that way long before you entered our profession. And so then we have these issues in teacher education as well, where we send teachers out who are not necessarily prepared to engage issues of inequities. How are those inequities produced? How do they, how are they maintained? And really how to bring the resiliency of communities that have been underserved, how they have historically always been pushing back and working to affirm their dignity and their right to a quality education. So we blame teachers by saying, well, this is not going right. Why do we have these leaking pipelines? But really, if we don't prepare teachers for that, then why should we be surprised when it doesn't happen? So even right now, our teaching profession is overwhelmingly white, it's overwhelmingly women, and the same thing is true of teacher educators. So we don't always have we don't always do a great job. If there's any fingers to be pointed, it would be at people like myself who are teacher educators. And how do we fail to fully prepare teachers to go in and talk about these hard issues and the reasons why students have been underserved over years. So I do understand why that term sometimes triggers people. Sometimes people get very upset about words, and they say, well, this is the word police. I understand that, and I think there's some truth to that, as far as, focusing on particular words. Although when I think about how words are freighted with historical meanings and histories, then I'm a little more aware of why words are so important. So, for example, here's a trend that you may have seen already in your reading. When Gloria Ladson Billings started out 20 years ago with this cottage industry of culturally responsive teaching, kind of the issue, the words were culturally responsive and culturally relevant. And they pretty much are used interchangeably. And then there was really a move to say culturally sustaining. And you might think, okay, well, that's kind of a minor thing, culturally relevant, culturally responsive, culturally sustaining, they're all somewhat synonymous. And yet, if you kind of dig into the word sustaining, then you can kind of see how the idea is that it's not just responding to, as in, I'm trying to tap into your language to help you become a better image of me. Like that was actually here in Utah and in a lot of parts of the United States. I'll just point to the Catholic Church because I am Catholic. The Catholic Church was notorious about learning the language of the indigenous peoples and like the Latinx communities that lived in this area that used to be part of Mexico, and they would learn the indigenous languages, the people's languages, so that they could better move the people into their way of thinking. So kind of the primary language of Spanish or whatever language it was like the medicine to make you become a better me. Do you see what I'm saying? So culturally sustaining was that the idea is that I can keep my language, I can keep my culture, I can keep my identity and my dignity and still be successful in school. And I can sustain that. So it's somewhat of a little different twist on what was culturally relevant and culturally responsive. So, you have to kind of think through how you feel about those nuances. and, you know, think about that. I try not to let that be a stumbling block for me. There definitely are some things that, you know, it's like, stay away from it, stay away from it. Just because the histories are so horrendous. For example, like the N-word, you know, people were lynched, murdered, all kinds of things that just like has such a history. Like, obviously that's a no-no. Words like colored, things like that, still, you know, those kind of things. Even the word savage, oof, you know, such horrendous histories that have been used to justify violence, and render some groups and individuals subhuman. So, but you're pretty safe by saying something like minoritized. You can say that because that's a very active verb. It's not like minority, but minoritized, that's a verb. Culturally and linguistically diverse, you know, that's you know, fine too. When you say that, think about diverse from what, right? That's always the that's the problem sometimes with language, is that the unspoken is that white is the normative standard from which others become diverse. So, you know, think about that as you look at language and terms. I tend to like to listen for what the group uses to name themselves and respect that and try to use that. So I know in my doctoral work, all of our readings were, it all was African American. And then living in Alabama, people did not generally call themselves African American. They usually called themselves Black. And so, you know, I just respect what people want to be called and go with that. So that's a super important conversation, even though sometimes people think that it's very tedious and they feel like the word police is after them. But I feel like as teachers, we have to be thoughtful about our language, particularly as we're in positions of authority over groups and people and vulnerable populations like children. And we have to interact with their parents and family, which their first and most important teachers come from their families and their communities. And so I for me, it's worth it to think through language. So I really appreciate that comment about what would be the good term. So
thank you. I think it's interesting too how it does change over time, and we have to keep up with what those changes are. We went to, when we were in Atlanta, we went to the Martin Luther King Memorial. It was amazing, so well done, beautiful. And but some of the language, even quoting Dr. King, it would be like, well, I don't, Negroes and things that we don't say now, right? So that was, I thought that was interesting too. But it was, if any of you have never been there, my husband thought it was funny because I think I was way more into it, even more because of everything I've learned in these classes. So I just thought it was so fascinating. So.
That's so wonderful. I have been there. And in fact, I'm going for a summer term. I don't have to teach on campus. So I'll be back in Mobile for the summer. And I wish that I could take some of my undergraduates to like see Birmingham, which is Birmingham, and you know, some of the Underground Railroad started in Mobile and things like that. So, you know, I feel like the more that teachers can kind of learn the history of where they're teaching, to me, it's fascinating. I have just really tried to immerse myself in learning more about the communities that have historically been in the Four Corners region. So yeah, they're very important how that the words change over time. But if you think about, what do people call themselves? Then you'll be okay. And don't worry, sometimes people get too worried about, I'm gonna make a mistake. I better not say anything. If you are honest and authentic in interacting with people, a lot of times they will not only excuse you for mistakes, but they will help you. And I have certainly made some horrendous mistakes that are embarrassing to this day. But I have been grateful for people that have been willing to, point things out to me, and I've been thoughtful about taking the feedback. I also don't expect the communities of color or and maybe even it's a community like the LGBTQ community. I don't expect them to teach me. I expect myself to teach myself. Like, I have to take ownership of my own learning, and I have to, learn about things. I don't put it on them to have to enlighten me, just because I haven't had to know a lot of these things. And I was an adult before I even knew that Dr. King hadn't erased all of the inequities that I knew about in the past, but I thought he handled it while I was a baby. But apparently, and I know that's not true. So I do take ownership of educating myself. And that works well for teachers, because we tend to love learning, and we tend to work, even though teaching is a difficult job, we're underpaid, underappreciated. There's many things that kind of push people away from being teachers. So those that stay usually are there for very wonderful, noble reasons. And they usually love to keep learning and are lifetime learners. So teachers are some of my very favorite people. And not just because I am a teacher too. Anything else? You got 5 minutes. And I am super good at wait time. Some teachers are not good at wait time, but I am.
So the second draft of the final paper, the due date changed to Sunday night, is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, just confirming here. I read your message. It was a change.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you need them extra time, if you don't, yeah, I see I have some in my inbox. I promise I will get to them. I try to turn it around as quick as possible so that you have everything you need and I don't slow you down.
But this is only a draft, not a
Right,
final.
just a draft. So you decide how developed you want it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, going once, going twice. Well, thank you for spending this hour with me. And again, be sure that you keep your eye on our grades page. If you see anything that's amiss, let me know. I'm happy to go back and look at it and see what happened. Usually it's an error on my part. So, but it helps me if you keep an eye on that too, before we have final grades submitted. Okay. So just on the other end of the email or the phone if you need. So have a wonderful rest of your week and let me know if you need anything, okay?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.